and welcome to Social Contemporaries. Today's episode is extra special since we will be discussing on the topic related to Pride. June is a Pride month, as we all know, and it is observed all across the world. In this episode, we'll talk about pronouns, Pride history, flags, and a variety of other topics related to LGBTQ plus community. Okay, talking about the LGBT Pride Month. LGBTQ Pride Month is a significant month dedicated to recognizing and honoring the LGBTQ people all around the world. This is a time when the LGBTQ community gathers to honor their accomplishment, love, and sense of belonging. Every year in the month of June, the Pride Month is honored with marches held all throughout the world. Pride Month brings together the LGBTQ community as well as supporters to advocate for equal rights, recognition, and opportunity for the LGBTQ community. The pride flag, often known as the rainbow flag, is an essential symbol for the LGBTQ community as it expresses their identity and togetherness. Later in this part, we will go through the various types of flags that are part of LGBTQ community. So, talking about Pride Month, how did Pride Month originated? First of all, the LGBTQ Pride Month was first celebrated on the June 28, 1969 at the Stonewall Inn in New York City to support the LGBTQ community and to provide equal justice. At the first celebration, the police raided the establishment, the Stonewall Inn in New York City, which was a popular gathering place for the LGBTQ community. During the celebration, they arrested the employees and patrons of the bar. As a result of these, a riot ensued in response, lasting approximately for 5 days. Thereby, this became the revolution year for the LGBTQ community. The subsequent year, or the next year, the first anniversary of Stonewall occurred on June 28, 1970 to celebrate Gay Pride. The event was named the Christopher Street Liberation Day March, after the New York City street served as a core of the LGBTQ community. The New York Pride March produced a national outpouring of support. As a result, LGBTQ Pride Month have become increasingly popular all over the world. So, additionally, the first official UK Gay Pride rally was held in London on 1st July 1972. The date was chosen as it was the nearest Saturday to the anniversary of the Stonewall riots of 1969, which saw people protest against a police raid at the Stonewall Inn, a gay bar in Manhattan. Also, talking about Pride Month theme, Pride Month has a unique theme each year. This year, for the June 2021 Pride Month, the theme is The Fight Continues. This theme reflects the numerous battles fought both throughout the country and in the city. For example, during the COVID-19 pandemic, the world witnessed police brutality, an alarming high murder rate for trans youth, economic hardship, climate disasters, and LGBTQ communities' rights being called into question at the Supreme Court level. Despite these bleak circumstances, the LGBTQ community is forging ahead to make a name for itself in the world. So, yeah, these themes are to support the community and to support the allies of the LGBTQ community. Also, we have attached a link which has information about the theme each year for the Pride Month. In case of Nepal, I believe that people are progressing and helping the community, but there are still those people who discriminate against them and believe that they are untouchables, despite the fact that they have done nothing wrong. Do you believe that the individual who do not support the LGBTQ community will ever alter their minds and fully understand and support them? What do you think about this, Akriti?
Yeah, the transition is definitely going to be very tricky because, as you said, there are so many people in our nation who are stuck with the mindset of the past. And by that, I mean those who believe in, support, and partake in the concepts and practices of untouchability, discrimination, especially social discrimination, hierarchies, and also negative stereotypes. So it's going to take a lot of time encouraging people to change their mindsets because they are already so adamant on just sticking to theirs, and they're not even open to broadening their mindsets or accepting even the smallest of changes. So, yeah, it's going to take a lot of convincing to actually make individuals understand the individuals of the LGBTQ plus community and fit them to be the so called normal people in everyone's perception. But at the same time, there are also individuals, the majority being youth, who are openly supporting the community and with international recognition, media coverage, and immense, ever increasing support for the LGBTQ plus community. I strongly believe their efforts will help influence and direct individuals across Nepal and also worldwide who are not already supportive to be equally supportive of the LGBTQ plus community. And of course, that is going to take time. But it is essential everyone understands and respects each individual, regardless of their identities. Therefore, there might be clashes and misunderstandings, but I strongly believe we'll eventually get to a point in time where individuals are not treated differently because of their identity, which may be inclusive of gender, nationality, traditions, beliefs, sex, sexuality, and anything else an individual may consider or want to include as their identity. And just adding on, if I may be a bit brave, I believe this reform will happen in the near decade or so. Because it is totally possible, we are capable of doing it. We already have started out the process of normalizing the taboo surrounding the LGBTQ plus community. And I guess the very first thing would be the recognition of the LGBTQ plus community flags. People have already recognized them to be legitimate flags and are aware of them. So that, I believe, is the first step towards starting a revolution.
Yes, Akriti, I definitely agree with you. That's for a greater good and for a positive change. You are definitely correct. Continuing on the segment on LGBTQ community's flag, the flag that is most commonly associated with the community, I believe, is a rainbow flag, which consists of rainbow colors. Apart from that, there are more than 20 flags that represents the community. I'll only be mentioning a few of them, and I will suggest you to paint that picture of the flag in your head while I give you the basic details about those flags. And further, you can compare it on Google as well. Some of the LGBTQ community's flags are bisexual flag. It consists of three colors: pink or magenta, royal blue, and purple or lavender. The pink represents same-sex attraction, royal blue represents opposite-sex attraction, purple or lavender represents attraction to both sexes. Moving on to the pansexual flag, it is made up of three different colors: pink, yellow, and blue. The flag has a pink stripe on top, a yellow stripe in the middle, and the blue stripe at the bottom. Moving on, asexual flag. Asexual flag consists of four colors: black, gray, white, and purple. The black represents asexuality as a whole, the gray represents asexuality and demisexuality, white represents sexuality, and purple represents the community. Lesbian flag. The lesbian flag has three shades of orange on top, ranging from the darkest orange to the lightest, white in the middle, and the three shades of pink at the bottom, with the darkest shade of pink at the bottom. Continuing, transgender flag. The transgender flag has three colors, which are blue, pink, and white, where blue represents the boy, the pink represents the girl, and white represents people who are transitioning and have no gender or are gender neutral. And lastly, non-binary flag consists of yellow on top, followed by white and purple respectively, and black at the bottom. Yellow represents a gender outside of the gender binary. White represents people who identify with many or all genders. Purple represents gender that are a combination of male and female. Black represents people who are a gender. I know I have not covered all the flags and its details. Thereby, for more information, we have provided two links that can help you learn more about LGBTQ community's flags. And I would also like to apologize if I have provided any incorrect information about the community. I had no intention of doing so.
While the topic had been raised a couple of years ago, especially this June in addition to observing Pride Month, I have also noticed that conversations about gender identities, and pronouns have become increasingly popular. Understanding gender identities and pronouns have become essential in online platforms and the real world. But this transition has become quite confusing for many people, including myself, who are used to the system of binary genders and their respective pronouns. This is completely understandable because we're going from a binary system to a system wherein there are numerous gender identities and pronouns. In fact, when I searched up how many gender identities there were, some sites said there were 15, some said there were 10, some said 72, some said over 100. And well, pronouns were a similar case. So it's pretty evident that the number of gender identities and pronouns are increasing every day. And so this will be quite difficult to navigate for people who don't even know what identity is. Our identity is what defines us, but yet some of us are unsure about what comprises identity and how to define it. So, in the following segment, I'll be trying my best to relay information that I'm already aware of and hopefully clear some confusions you may have. To put it in simple words, our identity can be anything that we want to be associated with. It can be our country, our language, our culture, religion, gender, sexuality, or people. It can be anything that we want to be identified with. We are used to being labeled from the very moment we are born. When we are born, doctors define our sex, and it could be male, female, or intersex, and they do it upon inspection of reproductive organs. We have personal titles according to our social statuses, which are inclusive of Ms., Miss, Mr., Mrs., Doctor, Sir, Lady, and so on. And another identity, another label, is gender. And for a very long time, people have just considered gender to be directly related to sex. If you're male, you are a man. But that is not true. Gender is actually socially constructed characteristics of an individual. So, what I mean to say is that while sex is the biological aspect, gender is the social aspect. Social aspect as in how you perceive yourself to be. Society has taught gender to be binary and with a hierarchy wherein males are superior to females. But gender is no longer just male and female, but rather a spectrum. And, well, as I said earlier, oftentimes gender is thought to be directly related to sex. However, that definition of gender is quite incorrect. Gender identity actually refers to a person's internal perception and their individual experience of gender, and that may or may not correspond to their sex. It isn't a requirement that a person's gender is directly correlated with their sex. So, to put it in very simple words, let's say each gender have some characteristics that are particular to that gender only. So, choosing a gender identity depends on which set of characteristics you want to identify with. And there are a number of genders. So, just to give a clear idea, I'm just going to be naming out and defining some of them. So, first is the cisgender, and they're not ranked upon any basis, it's just done randomly. So, a cisgender is a person whose gender identity matches their sex that was assigned at birth. So, that would mean that if you were a female when born and you identify as a female, then you're cisgender. A transgender would be a person who has changed their gender identity from the one they were assigned at birth. So that would mean if you were born a male and you changed to female, then you would be a transgender. The third one is non-binary or genderqueer. I put these two genders together because they're kind of similar. Non-binary or genderqueer is kind of like an umbrella term capturing all other gender identities, which is used to identify those types of gender identities which are not male or female, so they're outside the gender binary. Another type of gender is gender fluid, wherein a person's gender may change over time, meaning that usually happens when people are just exploring, and since gender is a socially constructed idea, it may change over time. So gender fluid is that gender identity. The other one is gender neutral, wherein a person or an individual does not refer to either sex, but only people in general, so they do not identify as any particular gender. Agender is defined as not having a gender. Some agender people describe it as a lack of gender, while some just say they're gender neutral. Pangender are those individuals who identify with having multiple gender identities. And well, pangender, other terms for pangender could be polygender or omnigender. And similar to that, there's another gender identity which is called bigender, which means having two gender identities, and trigender, having three gender identities. Another gender identity that I've listed down to share with you all is demigender, which is a gender identity that involves feeling a partial connection to any particular gender identity or just the concept of gender. So you're kinda connected to it, but you do not fully identify with it, then you're considered a demigender of that particular gender identity. And personally, the last one, which is third gender, is one I've been saying for a very long time. So it would just be whenever I was filling out a survey or anything, it would be male, female, and third gender. So third gender or other gender is a category including those individuals who do not place a name to their gender. But I personally believe that in that survey that I was used to taking, everything except for male and female was considered as third gender. Because male and female, binary, two genders, and the third gender would encompass everything else. So I kind of think both the definitions are correct. So you see, there are many gender identities, and these are just some of the very few that I've listed down. And well, it's already complicated as it is, and you may not have understood everything. Feel free to rewind if you have to. But I would suggest just doing your own research and figuring out, the types of gender identities there are, and maybe just exposing yourself to to the characteristics associated with those gender identities, because you might be confused about which gender identity you belong to. So for that, I think exposure is the most important thing you can do. Maybe just expose yourself to the way they behave, or expose yourself to a role model identifying with the same gender identity, and take all the time you need to identify which gender identity you identify the most with. As I said before, gender is a societal construction, and so it is very variable. Nobody is allowed to judge you based on what gender you identify with. And well, we're shifting from a binary gender system to a system where we have numerous gender identities. So take all the time you need, explore, research, and when you find one gender identity that you feel connected to, that you feel the most, that you feel represents you the most, then you could consider that to be your gender identity. Again, I believe gender is kind of like a personal preference, so exposure should work the best. And don't worry if you don't find the one gender identity you identify with. It's okay. It is perfectly fine to have as many gender identities as you wish to, and you do not have to feel like you have to belong to just one gender identity. Just find some gender identity that you identify the most with. I hope that cleared up some confusions you may have and gave you some information about the gender identities there are and how you may be exposed to them. Another thing I wanted to talk to you guys about was about pronouns. In English, our most commonly used pronouns are he or she, which specifically refer to a person's gender, the binary one. And for queer, gender non-conforming, non-binary, and transgender people, these pronouns may not fit, can create discomfort, and can cause stress and anxiety. But to solve that issue, we have other pronouns. But first, what are pronouns? So pronouns are any words replacing the noun. So if we were to talk about gender pronouns, let's give an example. Let's say Jack went to the zoo. Let's say he identifies with the pronouns he, him, his. Then we could subsequently say he then had ice cream instead of Jack then had ice cream. So in this case, he would be a pronoun, a gender pronoun for Jack. And as I said before, we commonly just use two sets of pronouns pertaining to the female and male identities. However, there are more sets of pronouns, just like there is a spectrum of genders. The pronouns to be used are all up to the individual who is being referred to, meaning it is each individual's choice. Some may prefer pronouns aligning with their sex or gender, some may prefer gender neutral ones, some may prefer pronouns pertaining to the wide spectrum of genders, and some may prefer to go without pronouns. But it should be clear that gender and pronouns do not directly correlate. A person can use one set of pronouns but not identify with the aligning gender identity. So, what are these pronouns, you ask? There are numerous sets of pronouns and they're increasing every day. But some of the most common ones include he, him, she, her, which refer to the binary gender identities, but again, it is all up to personal preference. And the others include they, them, sie, hier, hers, sie, zir, zirs, sie, them, zirs, am, er, and all the gender pronouns that I mentioned in the second lot after the binary ones are gender neutral, meaning it does not pertain to any gender in particular. While none of the pronouns are supposed to pertain to any gender identity in particular, the stereotypes already established with the male and female identity kind of make it biased, such that he, him, she, her pertains to the male and female identities respectively. Keep in mind that this list is not exclusive, and it's best to ask individuals which pronouns they prefer and stick to using the same. Also, we cannot assume one's gender according to the pronoun they use because that can be different again. However, if you do forget to ask for pronouns of an individual and mistakenly use the other pronouns, make sure to apologize and do not repeat the mistake again. It's better to ask than to just assume. This is extremely important as pronouns are part of each individual's identity and everyone has the right to have their own identity. Not using the correct pronouns could induce stress, anxiety, and have also been known to cause mental illnesses, and also suicide in some cases. This is indeed a very delicate matter, and we should all be careful in respecting each individual and their identity, however different it may be from the norm. It can be quite stressful and complicated to keep up with every gender identity, and making sure not to offend anyone. Arya, do you have any advice for how we can make sure not to offend anyone in terms of their identities?
As you previously stated, ask before assuming their pronoun. Just because they appear a certain way does not imply that they are using that pronoun, and immediately apologize for using the incorrect pronouns. But make sure to do more research on this context for more information because it is a crucial subject for the community.
Well, with this, we're done with all the information we'd like to share, and we do realize that this might have been a lot of information to take in for such a short amount of time, but nevertheless, it is urgently required. There is no time for us to be ignorant about such cases like we have in the past. We're progressing rapidly, and everybody has to keep up with it no matter what. The information we have relayed to you may not be relevant when you're hearing it, because it's transgressing rapidly and comes with a lot of complicated concepts. So we would like to apologize for any incorrect information in advance, if there happens to be any. However, the information would still be relevant to learning about pride and gender identities because we've made sure we use the right sources. This is not a choice, it is the reality. And although we may not have covered everything related to Pride Month, gender, and sexual identities, we hope this has been of some use, maybe just as a stepping stone to delve further into the complicated yet intriguing necessity, which is identity. And with this, I hope we have managed to share some information as the Pride Month comes to an end.